Following his arrest, Jesus was taken to the former Jewish high priest Annas, who questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. Jesus answered him, "I have spoken openly to the world. I have always taught in the synagogues and in the temple where all Jews come together. I have said nothing in secret. Why do you ask me? Ask those who have heard me what I said to them. They know what I said." And when he said these things, one of the officers standing by struck Jesus with his hand, saying, "Is that how you answer the high priest?" Jesus answered him, "If what I said is wrong, bear witness about the wrong. But if what I said is right, why do you strike me?" Annas then sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. John 18:20-24. As we learned in a previous episode, it was Caiaphas, the son-in-law of Annas, who had advised the Jews that, quote, "it would be expedient that one man should die for the people." Obviously, Caiaphas had stacked the deck against Jesus. The Gospel of John tells us that Peter and another disciple followed at a distance into the courtyard of the high priest that night. All the other disciples scattered after Jesus' arrest. Although the precise location of the high priest's courtyard is unknown, it was probably located in this area, which was the affluent part of Jerusalem, known as the Upper City. Archaeologists have uncovered ruins of beautiful homes in the Upper City that included enclosed central courtyards. Now, I don't know what the whole scene would have looked like as they were escorting Jesus through the city that night, but it was probably pretty intense, which is likely why Peter was following at a distance. Now, Peter ended up in the courtyard of the high priest. The high priest would have lived in a house very much like this one. I'm walking through the remains of a first-century priestly mansion. In fact, it could have actually been this house. We don't know for sure. Now, remember when Jesus told Peter that he would deny him 3 times before the rooster crowed at dawn? Well, sure enough, that night, while Peter was warming himself by the fire in the courtyard of the high priest, Peter was challenged 3 times to associate himself with Jesus. All 3 times, Peter denied his Lord. "I do not know him," Peter said. It was during this 3rd denial of Jesus that the rooster crowed. Certainly, this man was also with him, for he too is a Galilean. But Peter said, "Man, I do not know what you are talking about." And immediately, while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. And the Lord turned and looked at Peter. And Peter remembered the saying of the Lord, how he had said to him, "Before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times." And he went out and wept bitterly. Luke 22:59-62. Now, as we've learned so far in this series, Drive Through History of the Gospels, Jesus often punctuated his teachings with the statement, "I am," fill in the blank. But it was here at the makeshift trial of Jesus before the high priest and the council of the Sanhedrin that Jesus' statement, "I am," caused the greatest uproar. When day came, they led Jesus to the high priest Caiaphas, and all the chief priests and the elders and the scribes came together in the council of the Sanhedrin. Now the chief priests and the whole council were seeking testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but they found none. For many bore false witness against him, but their testimony did not agree. And the high priest stood up in their midst and asked Jesus, "Have you no answer to make? What is it that these men testify against you?" But he remained silent and made no answer. Again, the high priest asked him, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed?" And Jesus said, "I am, and you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven." And the high priest tore his garments and said, "What further witnesses do we need? You have heard his blasphemy. What is your decision?" And they all condemned him as deserving death. Mark 14, 55 through 64. What was going on here? Why was this simple statement of "I am" considered such blasphemy to the ears of the religious authorities? Maybe a little context is in order. In a previous debate with the Jewish leaders, Jesus claimed to have seen Abraham. Abraham, who was considered to be the father of the Hebrew people from nearly 2,000 years earlier. Now, when they challenged Jesus, he replied to them, "Before Abraham was, I am." John 8:58. Now, this reference to "I am" in the Hebrew language was specifically reserved for God himself, and it was therefore considered to be the ultimate blasphemy. Simply uttering the words prompted the Jewish leaders to attempt to stone Jesus, but he escaped. You see, the Hebrew word translated as Lord throughout the New Testament and is sometimes rendered Lord in the Old Testament was probably pronounced Yahweh and comes from the Hebrew verb to be. It was the special name that God revealed to Moses at the burning bush. Then Moses said to God, "If I come to the people of Israel and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' what shall I say to them?" God said to Moses, "I am who I am." And he said, "Say this to the people of Israel, 'I am has sent me to you.' This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations." Exodus 3:13 through 15. In this context, "I am" is the very name of God to the Hebrew people. "I am" declares God's absolute being, the source of everything, without beginning and without end. Therefore, before the high priest and the council of the elders, Jesus was not only declaring himself to be the Christ, the Messiah, the Savior of the world, but God himself. He was making a claim of divinity. In the Jewish context, Jesus was making himself out to be God when he declared, "I am." Now, since the Jewish authorities were seeking the death penalty for Jesus, they had to involve the Romans, who maintained the legal authority to inflict capital punishment throughout Judea. The Gospel of John says this: "Then they led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to the governor's headquarters. It was very early morning. They themselves did not enter the governor's headquarters so that they would not be defiled, but could eat the Passover. So Pilate went outside to them and said, 'What accusation do you bring against this man?' They answered him, 'If this man were not doing evil, we would not have delivered him over to you.' Pilate said to them, 'Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law.' The Jews said to him, 'It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death.'" John 18:28 through 31. As you'll recall from a previous episode, Pontius Pilate was on the scene from 26 to 36 AD. The historical record is clear. Pilate was the Roman prefect of Judea at the time of the arrest of Jesus. Furthermore, in addition to the gospel accounts, two important historians from the 1st and 2nd centuries, Josephus and Tacitus, also mention the trial of Jesus being presided over by Pontius Pilate. Now, we know from earlier in the gospel narrative that the trial of Jesus before Pilate occurred in Jerusalem. The Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and John also point to some specific references: the praetorium, the judgment seat, the pavement, and the enclosed courtyard. All of these things provide together some clues to an actual location for this event. The praetorium was the residence of the Roman prefect of Judea province, who at the time was Pontius Pilate. Now, the structure received its name from prior Roman usage referring to the place that a commander resided. Now, archaeological research has indicated that the remains of Herod the Great's palace became the residence for the governor, or the praetorium. Now, a few decades ago, some excavation took place here on the western side of the old city walls of Jerusalem, although many of the remains from the Roman period were destroyed or used in later construction. Let's unpack these biblical clues from the Gospels to an actual location for this event, the Praetorium. As we just learned, this was the residence of the Roman prefect Pontius Pilate. Research now points to Herod the Great's former palace being the Praetorium. The judgment seat. In Greek, this was known as the bema. It was a raised platform that acted as a judicial bench. The judgment seat at the Praetorium in Jerusalem was discovered here, right outside the city wall. The pavement. In Hebrew, this was known as Gabbatha, a courtyard paved with flat stones. Part of the pavement from the courtyard outside the Praetorium in Jerusalem is still preserved and can be seen right here today. This location was covered by dirt and debris for centuries. The Gospel of Luke continues with the Jewish religious leaders making some wild and somewhat embellished accusations against Jesus before Pilate. We found this man misleading our nation and forbidding us to give tribute to Caesar and saying that he himself is Christ, a king. And Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And he answered him, "You have said so." Then Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowds, "I find no guilt in this man." But they were urgent, saying, "He stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea, from Galilee even to this place." When Pilate heard this, he asked whether the man was a Galilean. And when he learned that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him over to Herod, who was himself in Jerusalem at that time. Luke 23, 2-7. As you'll recall from prior episodes, Herod Antipas was the son of Herod the Great. Rome appointed him as the local ruler, or tetrarch, of Galilee after his father died in 4 BC. Herod Antipas built his capital in Tiberias on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee. According to the Gospel accounts, Herod Antipas was the one who arrested and killed John the Baptizer a few years earlier. Although Herod Antipas ruled from the region of Galilee, it appears he was visiting Jerusalem in Judea during the Passover festivities. Most likely he was staying at a palatial mansion in the upper city of Jerusalem. When Herod saw Jesus, he was very glad, for he had long desired to see him because he had heard about him, and he was hoping to see some sign done by him. So he questioned him at some length, but he made no answer. The chief priests and the scribes stood by, vehemently accusing him. And Herod, with his soldiers, treated him with contempt and mocked him. Then, arraying him in splendid clothing, he sent him back to Pilate. Luke 23, 8-11. So picture the scene. Pilate escorts Jesus from the Praetorium through this gate and onto the pavement. He sits at the judgment seat right here and presents Jesus before the crowd of Judeans who had gathered there. As we're about to hear, this is where Pilate makes the case to punish and release Jesus. This is also where we're about to hear the crowd's response of "Crucify him." Pilate then called together the chief priests and the rulers of the people and said to them, "You brought me this man as one who was misleading the people, and after examining him before you, behold, I do not find this man guilty of any of your charges against him. Neither did Herod, for he sent him back to us. Look, nothing deserving death has been done by him. I will therefore punish and release him." Luke 23, 13-16. The Gospel of John then goes on and gives us a detailed account of the personal dialogue between Jesus and Pilate. Here again, we see the epic clash of kingdoms as we catch a glimpse of the struggle between these two very different types of empires. Therefore, Pilate entered again into the Praetorium and summoned Jesus and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Are you saying this on your own initiative, or did others tell you about me?" Pilate answered, I am not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and the chief priests delivered you to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then my servants would be fighting so that I would not be handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not of this realm." Therefore Pilate said to him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say correctly that I am a king. For this I have been born, and for this I have come into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice." Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" John 18:33 through 38. Pilate then took Jesus and scourged him. And the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and put a purple robe on him. And they began to come up to him and say, "Hail, King of the Jews!" and to give him slaps in the face. Pilate came out again and said to them, "Behold, I am bringing him out to you, so that you may know that I find no guilt in him." Jesus then came out, wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Behold the man." So when the chief priests and the officers saw him, they cried out, saying, "Crucify! Crucify!" Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him, for I find no guilt in him." The Jews answered him, "We have a law, and by that law he ought to die, because he made himself out to be the Son of God." John 19:1 through 7. Pilate returned to the praetorium and continued questioning Jesus. Once more, Pilate brought Jesus out before the crowd. He brought Jesus out and sat down on the judgment seat at a place called the Pavement, but in Hebrew, Gabbatha. Now it was the day of preparation for the Passover. It was about the 6th hour. And he said to the Jews, "Behold your king." So they cried out, "Away with him! Away with him! Crucify him!" Pilate said to them, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priests answered, "We have no king but Caesar." So he then handed him over to them to be crucified. John 19:13 through 16. In the end, all 4 gospel accounts tell us that the people cried out for Jesus' death. His destiny was at hand.